Well, it's my pleasure today to introduce Ruben, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about him before he gets started. Ruben originated from Dallas, Texas, and he earned his BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts in Printmaking from the Kansas City Art Institute in Kansas City. And then from there he went on to apprentice as an assistant for a number of artists, including artists like Peregrine, Honig. Some of you may have heard of her. She was on the show
Work of Art. Second place.
Which is an art-based reality TV series. Did anyone see that show?
It's from like 2008.
2008. Okay, it's a while ago. And people like
archives.
and people like Judy Chicago. So he worked with Judy Chicago. Judy Chicago, you know her if you've studied contemporary art. She is a leading feminist and installation artist. Really, really well known. In 2017, he completed an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts graduate program in visual arts at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. He currently teaches at the KCAI, Kansas City Art Institute in Kansas City, and he's really active in that area. He recently won a Charlotte Street Foundation Studio Residency Fellowship, and then he won a second year for that, which is really prestigious. His work is in a number of prominent collections at institutions across the nation. And he exhibits his work in the Kansas City area, and that includes a solo exhibition at Haw Contemporary. And if you're familiar with the gallery scene in Kansas City, you know that Haw Contemporary is the leading commercial gallery in Kansas City. It's in the West Bottoms. By the way, they're having an opening there this Friday. You should go.
Which one is that at? Because there's two, right?
It's at the one in the West Bottoms Hall.
Yeah, there's Stockyards location.
Stockyards.
Yeah, there's the Stockyards and the Crossroads. Yeah, Stockyards this Friday.
Yeah.
Go.
And he was recently in a show where he won a Best of Show award, and that was for a video titled "Can Dishwashing Be Queer?" And that was at the Kansas City Artists Coalition, and I think that was juried by Sarah Lynn Reese-Hardy, who was a major curator in the area in the Midwest. I counted 13 exhibitions that Ruben participated in just in 2018. So what you're getting here, just scratching the surface, just a taste of his achievements. So I'm going to stop there and let Ruben talk about his work. So please help me welcome Ruben Castillo.
Good lights, fancy magic. Cool. All right, hi everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Eric. I appreciate it. So the title I chose for this talk, I don't really title my talks. I kind of just like freewheel things. I just kind of go like, here's my work, which I'm still going to do today. But I did think of a title for this as the reproducibility of a queer archive. And mainly, I picked the title because I was like, oh, it sounded cool. But it also has a lot to do with what words I'm really thinking about a lot right now, which specifically are the three: reproducibility, queer, and archive. So for reproducibility, I'm really interested in the production and the reproduction of images of intimacy and the ways that these images become transformed by print. Printmaking is by primary artistic practice, not in the sense that I primarily make prints, but the fact that print and print culture have really become to inform every aspect of my visual interest and my practice. Queer and queerness for me simply embodies the practice of moving against what is considered normal, typical, expected, or standard. So this really links the word back to its initial definition as being something that is strange or weird. Back then they used to say oh, this individual is quite a queer fellow, meaning that he was very, he or she or they were very strange individuals. And I kind of like that initial feeling. In practice and in theory, queer in this really simple context, it affects everyone in a very broad abstract, complex ways that we don't tend to really expect. But once you sort of learn about it, you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize that impacted me like it does. It can be a really all-encompassing and perhaps lead to a little bit of erasure for specific identities, which I do not personally support. But at the end of the day, what I really appreciate in this word is its all-inclusiveness, and the way that it doesn't sort of create any sort of schisms, and it really sort of addresses a large group of people who are maybe considered strange or weird or not normal. And I really kind of strongly support a sense of unity among publics and having empathy for all aspects of human beings. And lastly, archive. This to me really kind of refers to memory. An archive, a collection of things that really speak about something that happened in the past or something. There can be learning tools. We can be alone with these objects, and we can sort of learn from them and grow from them. So that's one of my that's a word that I've been thinking a lot about, specifically the queer archive too. And one of the things we can sort of learn about queerness, how do we sort of understand where that comes from? How do we understand what it looks like, what it feels like? So I like to always start my talks with undergrad work, because it was the first time I really asked and challenged myself to make a claim on what intimacy looks like, particularly around queerness. I came out in 2008. This body of work here was made in 2010. So for me at the time, it was a way to really track sort of new sexual experiences that I was having with men after coming out and understanding what closeness and intimacy for me felt like. So what you're looking at are etchings on paper. The plates were 6 inches by 9 inches, printed on an 8 by 10 paper. And they were the same 2 plates that were the exact same size, and I sort of superimposed these figures over one another. I had this idea that the printing plates were like people, So I had these 2 plates come together, and they come together in this one little moment. And some sort of new relationship gets created. So you'll kind of see in the titles, plates 4 and 2, there were 4 plates, so I was like, let's mix and match them, And maybe even like invert them in sort of weird ways, print the same plate over itself and see what would happen. The couple, basically, that I'm sort of creating in these images become really suspended in these really like dreamy, ethereal spaces, and they were like my own proposition of an intimate moment, and really strange. I mean, just this way, these figures sort of like they stand it alone at one point. They stood alone at one point, and then like they come together, and they're just like weird, massive bodies, and I kind of just love that abstraction behind it. Especially like this one on the left, like what the hell happened with this neck? Like, it kind of like what's going on? That's so weird. It still like blows my mind today. They're just so weird. I continued this work for about a year. This mode of working where I would like combine plates over one another. I did it for about a year at KCAI when I was a student. There could become these really surprisingly sweet and serendipitous moments formally that would occur between them. Things that I didn't necessarily plan out. I'd plan out these individual poses, not necessarily thinking how they would sort of relate to each other, but in this sort of weird way where the head sort of serendipitously would lay on the sort of the back of the second figure, or the way that the arm would sort of wrap around and seem like it was sort of holding this other figure. Stuff like that. It was really exciting. There was a lot of conceptual potential and possibility, all coming from printmaking and thinking about layers and imagery, things sort of coming together that may have originated as a drawing or as a photograph. This is a lithograph. So I drew it on a lithographic stone, and sort of just started thinking about drawing in different ways. So actually taking those ideas and combining everything together, creating this sort of dense layering. Another lithograph. Again, just thinking about weirdness and this weird sort of shape, very egg-like shape. So my senior year at KCI culminated in a solo exhibition exploring intimate potentials. I called it body vernacular. I like the idea of vernacular being another word for language, but in a more complex sense to encompass things like particular gestures or body language of some kind, thinking about the body in a really broad aspect. Here's a little installation shot of that. It was at Leopold Gallery on Brookside, in their little basement space. It was a nice little intimate space. There were about 11 etchings total. This work really became about the image of intimacy at this point. I ditched the whole printing process that I'd done before, where I was like superimposing two plates, and just decided to focus primarily on drawing and creating these moments for myself. Still sort of thinking about them in these really ethereal, dreamy ways, and thinking about how these figures just sort of come together, and really sort of manipulating it all on my own. And I was really, at this time, I was really thinking about the romance of etching too as a process. So for those who don't know, it's etching was invented in the like around the 1500s. They would use it to etch like armor and metal. And Rembrandt in like the mid 1600s got really excited about this process and really good at it. And he made so many prints. He's more prolific as a printmaker than a painter, really. But I love this idea that you would put this piece of metal that was blank and flat and nothing on it, and you would put a ground on it, you'd draw on it, you would alter its surface as a sculptural object almost, and then you'd print it. And then you could print it again and again and again and again and again. There's this idea that the memory or the thing itself was etched into metal, and that was something really exciting to me. That romance of taking this thing that was sort of ephemeral and just sort of a fleeting moment and etching it into metal. It's just so, to me, it was great. It was wonderful. And I've never really let that go. I'm still thinking about those things today. And plot twist for all of you, the things you're thinking about right now, they're probably the things you're going to be thinking about in the future. They're not going away anytime soon. So, yeah, these images, they had their own sort of language as drawings. But the language of prints and being a multiple, again, it just influenced everything. There was a lot more control that I had over these images too by being on one plate. This was actually a still from a David Hockney film. The name of it escaped me. It was like one from the 60s, but it was really sort of looking at a lot of David Hockney's work, if you don't know. Especially his early work in the 70s was really kind of, when he came from the UK to California, he was really sort of taken with the freedom in the US that he was witnessing at the time, especially the sexual freedom. So he was really making a lot of work about the male body and the sort of relationships between men. And he had this sort of film, and I found this like film still when I was researching images with it. And I had these two men who were at the edge of a pool, and there was some distance between them, and so I was like, well, I'll just redraw it and I'll pull them together a little bit more closely to see what happens. This was at KCI, you have like a BFA piece, a big piece you want to sort of work towards. So this was, I really wanted to work big. I wanted to, etchings, pieces of metal are expensive. They're probably about this big, right? But I wanted to really go really big. So I got the biggest piece of metal I could get. So I got a 22 by 30 sheet of copper plate and just etched it, drew into it. And it was just, I don't know, something really gestural and rapturous about that. So after undergrad, I moved in with my partner. His name's Derek. We met at the Art Institute. We'll be together 8 years, actually, next week. So we moved in together, and I started actually really sharing an intimate space with somebody. And so suddenly my question became less about like, what does intimacy look like, and more so, where does it happen? So I took on a really kind of documentary role. I couldn't really print anymore. I wasn't in a print shop anymore. So I decided to really return to my first love, drawing. And I found that my drawing style was completely changed now after working on metal and making these tiny little lines. I'm just thinking about layers in different ways. And while like this work, there were portraits of my partner, They were also portraits of our home too, and they even addressed my own presence as viewer, even when I wasn't physically depicted. In this sense, I mean, he's looking sort of directly at the viewer, but as a work sort of originating in photography for me, I'm sort of present there. He's sort of looking at me, but also at you, whoever's looking. I was really thinking a lot about the idea of who is sort of present and who is that audience member. And to this day, photography still really impacts a lot of my work. I'm thinking a lot about theories that photographers talk about, specifically, like Roland Barthes' camera lucida, the idea of the punctum, which is a theory he came up with, which was basically this idea that in one image there could be some crucial little detail in there that would be what you would guide your eye to. So I like this idea of specificity and intentionality with creating my images. And rooting them kind of in the real. I became more interested in what story I could tell. This one in particular, like we'd moved when I enrolled at KU for my MFA, for my master's, we moved into a new apartment. And so I was like, let's keep making some of these drawings. This space in particular made me really consider the furniture and the objects in our private, intimate space. I thought about the way that things are designed for intimacy. For instance, the love seat here, it's designed for 2 people to sit in. It's just small enough 2 people can sit on there. And it's also a weird title, the love seat. I don't know, something about those little moments were something I was really drawn to. And I find myself really caring less about the couple and more about the place and the objects in it. This idea of homemaking became my real primary concern, and I was like, what kind of home do I want to make now? What kind of home do I want? And I didn't really know, so just to answer it, I went to IKEA. And I was like, okay, what do I want in my home? What do I really, really want? What do I desire the most in my home? And I was like, let's get some stuff, or let's think about stuff, that I really want, that maybe I can't afford, because I'm just fresh out of undergrad. Don't really have a full-time job yet. And so I kind of made my shopping list and these little postcard-sized drawings. And it was a way to really generate imagery and ideas for what I was materially yearning for. And additionally, I mean, by looking at all this stuff, I was generating imagery, and I was like, okay, I can keep working. When I don't know what to do, I can just keep going. And if you're concerned at all about my home's well-being, that couch is there right now. So I made it happen, okay? I have this chair too, a sort of classic pull-on chair. It's kind of comfy actually, it holds up really well. Don't have this light. Changed my mind about this light. Don't really like that light anymore. Little container. Do you have this light though? This is a good light. This is a good one. Working quickly, it really allowed me to really experience the real effective potential of these objects. As a kind of quick gut reaction moment, you look at a thing and you're like, I like this. I really like it a lot. You don't necessarily know why at the time. You got to think about it maybe. I'm certainly a very reactive individual, so it was really kind of fun exercise for me to just keep doing this. Dreaming about wooden hangers. It was like, God, what if we just got rid of all these cheap, Walmart plastic hangers and got wooden hangers? So thinking about those objects, it really enabled me to look at the potentials within both the objects and the spaces within my own home, and thinking about what was sort of there. And it became a real, for me, a documentarian. We've got cameras we have access to all the time now on our phones. So I was really just sort of documenting kind of as much as I could and just finding little moments and just being like, let's just see what happens. I would seek out really specific objects and arrangements that could be stand-ins or suggestions for the body, or a presence of some kind, So this new direction of sourcing imagery was not entirely about the body, but how it was eventually, how I really just started my graduate school work. So got to graduate school, actually This wasn't the first thing I made in graduate school. I actually made it prior to being there, but it really kind of kicked off a lot of the things I was thinking about. So this is the same love seat from the drawing earlier, but this time I was like, I'm just going to get rid of the figures. I don't want them there. I want it to be more about that potential of the body that the title love seat really suggests. In a way, I was wondering, I was just like, could you still sort of get something or a sense of somebody there? You know, my nightstand here, you know, is just a stand-in for me, you know, it's like simple, just not too much, things maybe possibly hidden. This one, you know, this little still life I kind of created, the couple actually began to appear again, but this time in this little like photo that we had in our home, right in between the plants there. It actually led me to then thinking about that little photo, which would be like what Barthes would call the punctum of the image. It made me really sort of look at the photographs themselves as objects, and I could create one-to-one reproductions of them in graphite. So we had these like little gold frames we got from like a thrift store, and so I just gold leafed the surface, and drew them really carefully, even drew like the frames, even though I covered them up, and put like a acrylic glazing over it to replicate glass almost, to really send the images back. Beyond being pictures, they were these drawn reproductions of physical objects that decorated our home. So you could come into our home and you could see them. And just like you could see them in our home, in an exhibition space, in a public exhibition space, you could go and actually see these and begin to sort of learn and pull information about who these individuals are. You become more of as a viewer, you become more investigative. And I like that idea of you as a viewer being more engaged, being very investigative. And so I thought, you know, what are things that I could do to kind of enhance that more? Beyond focusing just on objects, I was also thinking a lot about the architecture of home, specifically how space is designed to support the couple. I was looking specifically at, like in our bedroom, we had this idea of like yours and mine, you know, so like your closet, my closet. It was designed for us to be there. Another etching. This is Derek's closet, my closet. Bed. Bathroom mirrors, you saw earlier. So you can see how I was sort of generating all this imagery, but I was really starting to think a lot about too, like how I could play with that. Like that's actual real like texture that I etched of the terry cloth towel, and putting that texture into the copper plate and etching it so that it could have this weird sort of textural illusion. My documentation became a way for me to track the transition of my home as well and the objects within it. So like this, you know, to go back to that wooden hanger moment, you know, it was kind of humorous to me. I was like, I got the wooden hangers, yes, this is great, this is wonderful. But there's also something really kind of liminal and poetic about this little moment that I captured, because I was thinking about, you know, the moment, you know, before putting up all clothes, or it could be something like afterwards as well. You know, my life was in a really sort of weird transition in graduate school. It's a weird time. So I was really sort of thinking about that liminality, that sort of in-betweenness, that sort of tension that can sort of happen poetically in these images. And I was just really drawn to them. Very minimal moments. So also, I mean, like being a graduate student, it really means like experimenting and getting out of your comfort zone. I'm very much a works on paper person, so it was kind of a big leap for me to start actually building things, but it felt right. I was like, I'm thinking about things, I'm thinking about materials, I'm thinking about objects. So let's start using, let's start using them. Let's go to the hardware store. Let's get the drywall that, you know, they use to construct our space. Let's get the same carpet, because this was a cheap apartment, and I know exactly where they got that carpet from. They got it from Home Depot. Let's get that same paint. So this is like the finished piece right here. I actually had like the trim like custom made to be like perspectival as well. This particular nook in our apartment, we didn't really know what to do. We had this like little corner, and we're like, I don't know, we're gonna do it. And it's just something will go there. We'll see. So I was really thinking about it a lot, and so I was just like, well, that space has potential for me. Maybe it can have potentials for others. And there's this totally flat, work. So again, I was thinking a lot about drawing still and composition. It's flat like a drawing, two-dimensional, but still using those real objects. Decided to go a little bigger. So that one that we saw before was just like one little 4x8 sheet. This is now two combined together. Because they build these spaces with multiple pieces of drywall. And they only come in these standard sizes. So this is the final installation of that piece. I was being a little bit more direct with the materials now, and I was thinking about the subject matter a little more and focusing on a specific territory. I was thinking about the layout of our bedroom and simplification of it. So the pillows and the bed sheets and the framed prints on the wall. I was really kind of thinking about ornamentation and decoration. So I actually just made the more dimensional objects into prints. So things on my nightstand, things on Derek's nightstand, his and mine. In a way, these dimensional, monumental works really, they really became, kind of impressions of the world that I was in. Impressions not too different from the prints that I was creating. When you create a print, you create an impression of the thing. So working sculpturally in this way, again, it was all kind of there. They were so similar to the prints. But, to go back to this image, the things that I was sort of collecting, I spent a lot of time looking at these things and observing them, and really, what else can be there? And as I was working more towards sculpture and installation, what else could be? What else could happen? How can I make a sculpture like my drawing? Certainly, there's the language of drawing that you can use. You can talk about the form and perspective and texture and sort of how you sort of represent it, what surface it, how you can prepare that surface. But I was like, how do you make it 3D? How do you do that? So as I was experimenting, this is at the same time as that large, wall piece that I was doing. I was really interested in pulling objects from the natural environment. You'd expect to see this in a home, in a little encased closet space that was designed in a specific way. So I pulled them out of the home, put them in a completely different spot. Weird, totally weird. I don't know what was going on with that. But that weirdness, that sort of gut reaction to be like, that's so weird, that to me really resonated with that sort of queer identity, that queerness, that sort of strangeness that could happen. How you can make this very public space into a very strange one. So for me, I saw it as a way to begin to really queer space. I wanted to literally make sculptural drawings though. And so I was like, let's just ground these things. Let's take these objects and let's put paint on them. And let's mix them up with some latex paint so they stay flexible and make them white like the surface of paper I was used to working on. And then I literally would buff them with graphite. I was rubbing them into the surface with my hands to create these sort of dimensional objects. And this was the sort of final labor of love, I guess you could say. It's called Drawing of Our Closets. I get people who ask me, they're like, oh, is that a drawing? No. Like I didn't actually physically draw it on paper, but in a way, it is a drawing. It is a drawing. It's a very tongue-in-cheek drawing. Just coated everything in graphite. The textures that were sort of happening here, I loved this little moment. There was something that was really extreme about it. It was sort of heightened and hyper-real in this way. The paint really made it so much more textural, and it sort of enhanced the cotton qualities of the fabric. And then the graphite created this new sheen to it. It was very exciting to me. Drawing to me is a way to understand the world and ourselves. It's a very epistemological act, right? It's also a very intimate one because you're sort of working on this little sheet of paper. You're sort of world building. You're thinking about the things in these really big ways, but in this sort of tiny contained little space. And I really love this sort of like raw and visceralness of this work. So one of my other really long-term studio projects, dating back to 2013 after undergrad, was I would document mine and my partner's bed every single morning when we get up. And I liked this idea that the compositions were constantly changing, depending on when I would just choose to take the photograph. Sometimes I would take it in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I forgot to take this photo and nothing's really changed, so I'll just snap a photo real quick. But then off and on for years, and I always really felt that the bed really became this intimate space where things could happen. The pillows themselves were really fascinating to me, a little more than the blankets and the bed sheets, but the pillows themselves, they were tousled every single morning, and they were just in these weird sort of shapes that, in the space that we sort of shared. We'd come together and shared this space. And it was, I don't know, something about it was really exciting. Thinking about that, obviously I think about Felix Gonzalez-Torres, another 90s queer artist who was really interested in taking the private and pulling it into the public. His entire body of work is about that. And I mean, that's a print, in a very public space. So again, how could I not? So his ghost kind of haunted me, and I was really fascinated with the textures of the pillowcases. I made these prints, sealed them, hardened them so that I could ink them up and run them through the press and create an impression of them. They weren't quite right, and I didn't quite know what I wanted from them yet. I was like, I don't really know what I want to get out of this texture yet. And I had this sculpture professor who was on my thesis committee, and he was like an installation conceptual artist. And I was like, John, what do I do? I can't figure it out. Like, what do you think? And he was just left me with this like cryptic answer. And he was just like, you should try touching your art more. And I was like, what? So I was just like, I don't know what that means, but I had this sort of humorous idea of like what intimacy was from the 90s growing up, and just like remember this little scene right here from Titanic. I even made like a joke on it on my Instagram. It was like, here I'm touching it, in the same way that Kate Winslet's like in this moment of ecstasy, just like hitting the window and leaving this like mark. And she has like she like finally makes love with Leonardo DiCaprio. So I was like, yeah, that's love right there. That's intimate as hell. So that actually really became a visual strategy for me. I had this printmaking process where I could capture the textures and the sort of gestures and the physical objects of materials. And so I started making these little soft ground etchings. And I would just like, I would make the texture of the pillowcase, and then I would think about what sort of gesture do I want to enact. I started thinking about them even as like weird alien people. Grew up with the X-Files, right? So I was thinking a lot about aliens. They seemed really ghostly in a way, and I like this idea that these were documents of a moment as well. Not so unlike the etchings that I was making with figures in them. Very tiny works, 4 by 6 inches. I called this series Etchings Pillow Talk, because after that colloquialism of like really intimate communication, typically post-coital. So I don't know, it's a really fascinating word to me. I just like that idea of it. I'm really bad at like communicating like my affection with words. I'm not like the best like words person when it comes to like feelings and whatnot. But these prints became a real way for me to articulate at least like the physical components of what I was thinking about. The visual strategies from that I sort of merged with my drawing and created these sort of dreamy landscapes from the photographs that I was documenting. So I started taking those photos of our pillows and working with them and creating these sort of strange scenes. In a way that the pillows became like bodies. The way they're just floating in these ethereal spaces, they weren't much different to me visually when I was looking at them. And these were larger etchings as well. So this is the largest one, 26 by 36 inches. It's pretty large. So video kind of became another really kind of natural direction for me to take, thinking about images and series of images, and that's kind of what a video is. It's just a series of stills that sort of move with sound in them. It was a natural sort of progression for me. It's something I always kind of wanted, and I loved film and I loved movies, obviously, citing Titanic as an influence. So I did this video performance piece where I recorded myself washing the dishes that had piled up due to being, I was so caught up at the time with my MFA thesis. I was stressed out. My partner was working all the time, and we were just like, let's not do anything. But I had this like pile that was growing, and I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I wanted to create an access point for the viewer to really bring the private out into the public. And I started subtitling my thoughts, my dreams, and my anxieties, even directly about the show. It was kind of a meta piece for me. But it's just like, God, is this work going to be intimate enough? And I had this like question in my mind. I was like, is this like a queer? I don't know what queer is. Who knows? I'm not sure. It was a 25-minute long video performance, though. It was part of my thesis show, which took place at Hawk Contemporary. So I brought all the work together, and it was the first time I could really see it all together. So this is the Pillow Talk series. I like this idea of it all coming into a corner. I read about Gaston Bachelard, French theorist, who wrote this book, The Poetics of Space. It's called The Corner, the space one goes to daydream. So I had this little private room, people could actually view the video. Since then, I've really, continued my complex practice. I've really returned to, IKEA because I didn't really know what to do after that work. I just kept going. So I made this little series, Make Room for Comfortable. I went through the pages of IKEA and I was looking at all the instances where pillows were advertised, and I was really kind of interested in like fleshing that out in graduate school. Maybe because I wanted to find my own sort of comfortable space again, being thrust back into the real world. You could say I was a little obsessive. A series of 28 drawings. Took the people out, didn't want anything else, and just wanted the pillows. So if a person was in there, sorry, you're out. A lot of the compositions I would witness were not unlike the ones that I'd seen before. Working like that, there was an image that I had made, one of the drawings, like didn't make it in there, 'cause, I had this weird studio visit that happened, and before I could even document it, the drawing sold. And I was like, I wanted that piece back. I had this like little photograph of it, so I made a print of it. So having working in that way, I can react to it and go like, okay, don't have that anymore, let's make it a print. And this particular image that I was thinking a lot about now really found its way into more video work. I have more videos that I can make then. This is one of my most recent video pieces that I created. It's titled Fluff. And it's a video in which I fluff every single pillow in our home. In between that footage, I would cut it with images of my partner giving me a massage, and I like this idea that we have these things that we have to do to take care of ourselves. These ideas of self-care, and you have to do these gestures and these rituals every single day, and I really liked that a lot. So that's that thinking about it really manifested that way. Made new drawings. I was thinking a lot about personal and intimate space. So the one on the left, that's a personal space. Each of the shelves are 18 inches, which is defined as personal space. And 6 inches or less is what intimate space is. So FYI, there's your little lesson there. It's also, again, thinking about those fantasies and dreams and things that I would want, I was like, I want some pink couches. We also painted our bedroom pink at the time, so I was like inundated with pink. It was this really wonderful color to wake up to in the morning. It was just this nice little subtle neutral pink. it was something, you know, a gesture that I really, really liked a lot. You know, something about that possibility, that potential. You could just fantasize about something and you can make it happen. These are some recent etchings that I've been working on now. I'm still working in the same kind of way, but responding to artists from the past. So I was really looking at a lot of Goya's work and responding to that. Thinking about the ideas of how he was sort of breaking up tone. And this is a series I'm currently in the middle of working on. It's going to be called 1 Week in Spring. Found like a time where I was pretty consistent actually in taking photographs for 1 whole week. And I was like really kind of drawn to that consistency. So I was like, I'm going to make some work specifically about this one little moment. I like this idea being in spring, you know, relating to Spring Awakening, which was an old German play, looking at how like sexuality culturally began to shape young individuals. Made my first engraving. Didn't know how to engrave, so I was like, I really want to, you know, looking at this print history, and I want to make my own engraving. Really hard. I know there's an amazing engraving program here. Y'all are really lucky with that. Like James Ellers is really awesome. So I decided to make this one-to-one recreation of a Albert Dürer drawing, 6 pillows. She did in 1493. It had never been made into an engraving, but the line work that he was thinking a lot about, he was sort of a master engraver. You know, he was really thinking about how he could possibly prepare that for engraving. So I was like, let's make it an engraving. The back of that actually is this really sort of strange image. A lot of times artists would work on the front and back of their substrates. This was the back of it. A self-portrait, study of a hand, which I think is really serendipitous. So I'm thinking a lot about that. I'm like, going to respond to that in some kind of way. Some last little images. My main questions lately now are just like, what is worth recording, and what is worth sort of putting out into the world? What is that archive that I'm sort of contributing to? What am I sort of learning from the materials around me? And how can I sort of recreate that for an audience member? Prints. You know, at the end of the day, all I can really kind of say about like my work, the best way to describe it, is the really physical, tactile quality of an experience of, you know, this sort of metaphorical you and me, you know, this idea of experience and contact with another person. This is the most recent work I've done. It's on view right now at the Lawrence Art Center in a drawing exhibition. Again, another little tongue-in-cheek reference. They're like, "What's a drawing show?" I'm like, "Cool, can I do this?" So these are actual pillowcases. Yeah. So we're running out of time. These are some little things. If you want to email me any more questions about any of this stuff, you can email me there. My website is there, and you can also follow me on Instagram. So I know we have a couple minutes left. Does anyone have questions? Maybe get to one or two. Or I'll answer to get out. Eric's got a question. You in the front.
So I think for a lot of artists, making mistakes and failures is a really important part of the process, but it's not something that gets talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So do you make mistakes?
All the time. All the time.
Is it an important part of your studio practice, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, failure is so important. A lot of times, you know, especially in this like first engraving I did, go back. There's so many like slip-ups that I would make, and the lines weren't sort of right. But it was all about sort of like learning, I guess, and like figuring out. I'm like, I gotta figure this thing out. You know, like I don't know how to engrave. I'm not having someone like teach me. I just gotta sort of figure it out. And you know, it's the mistakes, especially in a copper plate, they don't go away. They're always going to be there. So I've really kind of learned to improvise with them in a way and sort of play with them more. And there's certainly a bunch of work here that I don't really show. And who knows? I mean, like even my feelings about these could change, you know, from one day to the next. They could be deemed failures to me, but it's important for me to keep making them and sort of learning from them. Even the way that, you know, an idea can sort of evolve over time. one thing in my practice that like I've thought a lot about is like how long something sits with me. I can get very obsessive about it. So like even on the like, let's see, let me go back to this specific little section. Like one mistake that I'd made was like an early, sorry, I got a lot of these images. Like this was a failure, total failure. But I was like, I'm not letting that go. There's something there, it wasn't like the best received thing, but I was like, I gotta work it more. And at first I'd like actually buffed all that with graphite, and it was like, no, still not there. And I'm like, all right, you gotta keep trying. So you just keep like hammering away at it, and it's really important to kind of stick with those things and learn from them. There is a really kind of nice quality about being that obsessive, I think. It means you really are going to kind of never give up on it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.